Well, good morning. Welcome and thank you for joining us. My name is Laree Williamson. I'm the CEO of Agriculture for Life, and we are absolutely delighted to have Farmer Andre and Tara with us today. And we're going to dig deep into learning more about Alberta canola and where our canola products come from. So without further ado, Tara and Andre, over to you.
Thanks, Laree. It's lovely to meet you. So I'm Tara Baycroft, and I'm the Agriculture and Education Coordinator and with Alberta Canola. So part of my job is to develop agriculture and educational related resources for teachers and students in the general public as it relates to curriculum about canola production, science, and health, and everything related to canola. And with us, we have Andre Hart. You want to give a quick wave, Andre? Yeah. And so he will be telling us and sharing his canola story with you in a little bit, and we'll get rolling with our presentation. So our organization that I am with is called Alberta Canola Producers, and specifically the part of the program that I'm responsible for is Learn Canola under Alberta Canola Producers. And we focus on teaching for tomorrow. So just a quick overview today in regards to what we're going to cover. So we'll do a quick introduction. We're going to expand your knowledge with some fun facts. And then we'll get into Andre's canola story. And if we'll have some time at the end, hopefully, to do a little bit of Canola 101 MythBusters. And if there are questions along the journey, as Larry had said, please feel free to throw those into the chat box. And Helena and or Laree will kind of stop us. We'll get to those, and we can also answer any questions at the end. So as I said before, my name is Tara Baycroft, and I have been in my role for just now over 2 years with Alberta Canola Producers. And a little bit about our organization. We were first founded in 1989, and we were the province's first refundable checkoff producer organization. So basically that kind of equates to we are funded by farmers, and we represent about 14,000 farmers in Alberta, canola farmers in Alberta. And our mission is to support the long-term success of canola farmers in Alberta through research, extension, consumer engagement, and advocacy. And the commission in no way regulates or is involved with the production, buying, or selling of canola. Now, just a quick side note here in the background. So this is from my family farm out near Basha, and this is our canola field just before harvest a couple of years ago. And I'm about a fourth generation family farmer, if you will. And our family farm is it's about 140 years, or is approaching that right now. And in the background was my great-great-grandparents' original homestead. So it's kind of, I thought it'd be a nice picture to share with you guys. So our Alberta Canola's goals regarding education and promotion. So we want to educate students and the general public, including all teachers and students, about how canola is safely and sustainably produced, the health benefits of canola, and the larger issue of where consumers are getting their food. We also, as part of my program, want to assist growers in finding their public voice as they operate under increased public scrutiny in the future in regards to social license. We also sell more product. We want to help sell more canola product by increasing demand in canola share internationally and specifically in Eastern and Central Canada. So next, before I turn it over to Andre, we have a little bit of a video to expand your knowledge, if you will, to start everything off with.
Canadian farmers grow a lot of different crops. I'll bet many of them make their way to your table every day. Out of all of them, canola is the most versatile in your kitchen and an excellent choice for a healthy diet. Canola is easy to spot by its bright yellow flowers. These beautiful fields swaying in the wind have become a common sight on the prairie landscape. By harvest time, the flowers have been pollinated, formed pods, and filled up each tiny canola seed with up to 43% canola oil. That's a really efficient crop. Canola is 100% Canadian and was first bred on the prairies by scientists at the University of Manitoba and Ag Canada research stations in the late 1960s and early 1970s. The first variety was called Tower. Dr. Balder Stephenson and Dr. Keith Downey use traditional plant breeding methods to produce erucic acid and glucosinolates found in rapeseed, compounds that lack nutritional properties, leaving them with a new crop they called canola. The word canola is a combination of the words Canadian and oil. Pretty cool, huh? Canola oil has exploded in popularity to become one of the most widely used cooking oils in the world. It can be used as a great substitute for almost any other oil. It also provides livestock with great high-protein feed. Canola meal is a byproduct from crushing canola seeds to make canola oil. So there you have it, canola, a crop grown right here in Canada that's being enjoyed by people all over the world.
Excellent. Whoops.
Canadian farmers grow a lot of different crops. I'll bet
My
many of them...
apologies, everyone. So hopefully that helped to give you a little bit of initial information about canola.
Canadian farmers...
And next, we'll go into expanding your knowledge a little bit further with some fun facts or did you know facts. Andre, would you like to speak to those a little bit more?
Yeah, well, thank you very much. You know, canola is such a wonderfully diverse oil that we can use, and it's so good for cooking. And you know, like a lot of the things we see, you know, on the screen, you know, it is gluten free, but you know, the how the oil is built, how it's made up, it's very heart healthy, and it's very good for you. So it's a wonderfully good oil to cook with. The canola meal, besides that, it's very high in protein, and some of the studies being done now with dairy cows, it actually increases milk production. So you know, it's one of the things we can actually use the whole seed, and it can be used in a diverse amount of ways to deal with it.
Excellent. And just on a fun side note, so if canola meal is incorporated into the feed that is fed to dairy cows, it can help to increase milk production by 1 liter of milk per cow per day. Pretty wild. So we'll also continue on here. So I'm going to let probably what we'll kind of do is set up a little bit of an interview style now, and we'll go through Andre's canola story, if we will. So Andre, can you tell us, where do you farm exactly and how long have you been farming there for?
So actually, I farm in the northern part of Alberta in the Peace River country, so just a little northwest of Beaver Lodge or Grand Prairie, and actually very close to the Beaver Lodge Research Station, which is actually Canada's other than one other station, is probably one of the northernmost research stations in Ag Canada's portfolio of research stations. So I'm a third generation farmer. I've got 3 daughters, one who is actually my oldest, who's a teacher. My 2 other daughters are in university right now, and actually both are graduating this year, and looking very much forward for them to, well, one for sure is coming back to the farm, and I think one is coming back to the farm for the summertime. So looking very forward to connecting with them. Other than that, basically we grow canola and we grow malt barley, which can be made into tea and beer. Other than that, we have the only livestock we have on our farm is we have 2 dogs and we have 4 cats.
Excellent. So there's probably not a lot of mice running around on your property, is there, Andre?
I think we have very few mice right now. Yeah.
Excellent. So Andre, can you also just talk a little bit about what is your role with Alberta Canola, and how did you kind of come to be involved with Alberta Canola producers?
So actually, Alberta Canola is governed by 12 directors, which make up different regions of Alberta. I'm actually the director that looks after this area, the South Piece, and I was actually elected to this role actually 5 years ago. And through that, so I sit on Alberta Canola, and then plus through that, I actually sit on a couple national organizations. So I actually do quite a bit of work with the federal government involving policy surrounding canola.
Very cool. And I think I may have forgot to mention, my apologies, Andre. So Andre would be my program chair. So he oversees kind of our group, our public engagement promotion committee group as well.
Yes.
Excellent. So Andre, do you have moving? Oh, and can I ask Andre, before we move on, can you explain what this is about, this picture here off to the left, if that's possible?
Oh, so it's, it's really interesting. Agriculture is like everything else. We don't, unless we see it day to day, we don't really understand it. But one of the things, agriculture has changed immensely in the last few years. The use of technology and different types of technology to farm more efficiently, to farm better, to farm more sustainably, and to be better for the climate. We are actually starting to use different technologies, and so actually what you see is a drone that actually we use for field mapping, to see if we can make better use of our some of our fields, because if we can change the usage or make or more efficiently use our fields, it's better for all of us. So so that is, so that's a drone that we actually just been using for about 2 years now.
Very cool. And I do believe in our next footage here, and I hope that there is no sound with this, just so that everybody is aware, but maybe Andre, you can explain kind of what's going on, or what's this video all about?
Yeah, so this is a quick aerial video of our farmyard. So actually this was taken last fall, and this would have been in October, but basically this is in the morning and we are just getting ready to go out and harvest for the day. So you'll see 2 combines which harvest the canola, and what's moving right now is the grain cart. So basically that basically unloads, we unload the canola into the grain cart to move, to put into trucks or into storage. So basically you can see, and that's where we're just flying over, that's our storage yard. And right in the middle of that we do have a grain dryer, because it gets back to, you don't always harvest in optimal conditions. As we fly over, you can see up, we're on top of a hill, but basically this is one of our canola fields that actually we will be harvesting, what we did harvest that day.
Excellent. Thanks, Andre. Pretty neat what technology can do. Feel like we're right at your house. But moving along here. So Andre, why did you get into farming, and what do you enjoy about farming? Can I go with that?
So we are a 3rd generation farm. So my grandfather farmed and my father farmed, and it's something I grew up into. So it's, it's much like any other family business. You'll see lots in the cities where family stores or family businesses go from one generation to another. And that's basically what our farm has done. I grew up on the farm, and that's what I was used to. Really enjoy it. Obviously we spend a lot of time outdoors. So, but you know what? It brings different challenges day to day, but no one day is the same. So, I really enjoy farming also. And, it is what it is. Things are challenging, but at the same time, it's a fun business. I really enjoy it.
That's awesome. And now, Andre, you grow a couple of different crops you mentioned, and what's the importance of growing the different crops, and how do they work together? If you can talk about that.
Yeah, so it's really interesting. Canola, when we do grow a lot of canola, and we do grow, we grow that with barley. And one of the reasons we do have to grow different crops is because it doesn't matter what the crop is or what we grow. If you grow something for too long, it actually starts to produce, or diseases start to flourish and other things start to flourish. So we have to break the cycles, and every crop has its own pluses and minuses. The really interesting thing with canola, it's got it's from the mustard family, but I don't know if you ever look at it. If you look at that type of plant, it's actually got a huge taproot too. It's much like a dandelion root. So it actually goes down really, really deep into the soil. And so then it actually works really good, because it breaks up the soil a little bit and makes it a little bit looser, and makes it easier for water to actually go down and drain into the water, or drain into the soil. So, we use different crops for different reasons, but the basic, you can't grow the same crop year after year. You have to have a rotation, and you have to break disease cycles, because we get diseases, we get funguses. It's amazing what can happen in the field. So that's why we have a good rotation.
Okay. And so that would be referred to as what farmers call a crop rotation, correct, Andre?
Correct.
Awesome. Okay. And how often do you kind of rotate your crops, or can you talk a little bit about that by chance?
Well, it's we never try to grow a crop year to year, or we always try and break the rotation every year. So it gets back to and especially canola, because there are some diseases that are starting to come into Canada. So it's really good idea not to grow crops year after year. It's really interesting. Some people bring peas into the rotation also, but they also have their own set of diseases. So it doesn't matter what the crop is, we have to break the rotation. So I try not to grow any one crop any more than 1 year at a time without going into another one.
Great, that's excellent. And Helena or Larry, are there any questions from the audience by chance at this point so far?
Not yet, but that's a good reminder. If anyone is just joining us, feel free to ask questions in the chat and we'll ask them throughout the presentation.
Thank you. All right, well, Andre, I have a few more questions if that's okay with you to keep going through. So
Yep.
Carrying on, so Andre, how did you get into, I guess, more into farming and more specifically canola farming? What made you kind of go with that?
Yeah, so it's interesting, canola is such a interesting crop. So the pictures we're looking at is shortly probably about 3 weeks after they're seeded. But, it's really interesting to watch. It's like gardening in a massive scale, but it's so good. It's so satisfying basically to see, a crop, after it's been seeded, to watch the different life cycles of a plant, but also to come up and see what you've done is actually producing something. So it gets back to, that's one of the things I do like about farming. It gets back to throughout the year, we're changing all the time. The plants are changing all the time, and we're always looking for different things. So we're just starting to see, here we're just starting to see canolas are just starting to flower. So, I'm knowing in a few weeks that this field will be totally yellow or in golden color, actually, like Tara's background. So which is really, really interesting.
Excellent. Thanks, Andre. And can you talk also a little bit, why did you kind of decide to join Alberta Canola Producers, if you don't mind, please?
Yes. So when it gets back to, I've talked about pressures on why we rotate crops and why we do different things. But the interesting thing is it gets back to, there's a lot of misinformation out there about what we do and how we do it. And that's probably one of the reasons I joined Alberta Canola, because it gets back to, unfortunately, whether we like it or not, we do have to use different things to control weeds and insects. And I think I talked about diseases, because it gets back to, we need to grow, we need to grow a good crop to make a living. But the other thing is we need to grow a good crop to be able to feed everybody. If you look at what's happening right now in the world, last year we've had not a lot of rain across Canada. So it gets back to, whenever we can grow a good crop, we have to, because we always can't guarantee a good crop, because it doesn't always rain when we want it to. If we look at what's happening in Europe right now, we have a country that a lot of us are close to, but it gets back to, we're not sure if they're going to be able to seed a crop or not this year. So what, and I'm talking about the Ukraine, but it gets back to that it's a huge amount of acres. They're known as the breadbasket of Europe, but we don't know whether there's going to be a crop or not at all this year. So it gets back to, we have to be able to produce whatever we can as efficiently as we can, and as is beneficial to the climate as we can.
Excellent. Thanks, Andre. So,
and
Andre,
just before we, just before we move on, we do have a question in the chat.
Sure.
from Miss Cummings' class. She says, down south, some of my students mention having to spray their boots after working with canola. Is this the same for your farm?
This is interesting. No, I don't. I've never had to do that, I guess, and I would be interested to know what kind of what type of a spray they are referring to. But it's not something. It's not something I usually worry about. But also at the same time, when I do go to spray a canola crop, I usually go in and spray it and leave, and I don't come back for a few days. But at the same time, if you look at the concentrations of chemical we use, basically they don't harm people. We don't have to. The only time I would be careful of if I had to spray an insecticide because of unbeneficial insects that are overtaking the field. But over that, on regular on chemical, or basically on sprays that we would use to spray weeds with, they are such low concentrations that it's not usually an issue.
Okay, yeah, that's interesting, the differences between operations. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. So carrying on, Andre, so approximately how big is your farm, or how many acres did you say that you have?
So our farm is, we have about 5,000 acres. So, and I'm just trying to remember, we had worked this out.
Yeah.
How many football fields is that?
That's right. So I will walk, just so for the, and I know one of the classes might have been off the prior presentation, but for the other interested people who may have missed this. So I always talk about acres with students in regards to football fields, because that's how I compare things. So one standard football field is about 110 meters long by about 48.9 meters wide, okay? So the football playing field is about 91.4 meters long, and each end zone is about 9.14 meters deep. So the actual area of your football field would be about 17,556.48 meters squared, and which equates to the area of 1 acre being about 13,277.09 meters squared, or about 1.32 football fields per 1 acre. So, Andre, when we worked it last time, we kind of chat and whatnot, your approximate 5,000 acres would be about 3,800 football fields is what we had determined. So yeah.
It was a lot of football fields. It surprised me.
That's right. You can have like many football games there. So Andre, could you maybe talk about what's going on in this picture a little bit that we have on the screen?
Sure. So absolutely. So that is actually a picture of us harvesting canola. And basically the combine we're looking at is basically unloading canola as it travels. So that's one of the things we try and do to make it more efficiently. When the combine is running, it actually we try not to let it ever stop. It just keeps on going. So to be able to do that, and that's why we have that cart, which actually holds a truckload of canola when it's full. But anyway, so the combine never stops, and the cart just comes up to it and just travels beside it as it unloads into it.
Excellent. And Andre, how many people do you have involved in your operation working for you?
Yeah, so actually in the fall, we try and do things very efficiently, and that's basically we need 2 combine operators and a cart operator, because that's what we need. So generally I have 3, maybe 4 people, in the spring and the fall.
Excellent. So Andre, what generation of farmer are you?
So I'm a 3rd generation farmer, and actually you're looking at my youngest daughter right now, who would be the 4th generation farmer, if she continues to farm. So the interesting thing is this is actually a picture of her helping out last spring. So my 2 youngest daughters, they love the farm and very willing participants in spring and fall. Excellent. And when they can.
Great. And so did they have that interest in continuing on to farm then, Andre?
Yeah, absolutely. I think they would really much like to continue on with the farm, and it's wonderful to see.
Great. And you do have one daughter who teaches also, am I right?
Correct. Yep. She
Yeah,
teaches by Edmonton. Yeah.
great. And your other two daughters, what do they do for work?
So it's interesting.
Cool.
My youngest daughter, who's in the picture, is becoming, she is actually going to graduate this year as a psychologist. So she is, they're both getting professional degrees. And then my other daughter, who is going to be graduating also this year, is going to be a radiation therapist. And she's actually out in Halifax right now getting her clinical work done there. So she's kind of where our girls are kind of all over the country.
Very cool. Awesome. Well, thank you. So we'll keep going on here for the, and so our next question here is, I guess, 5 fun facts about you that maybe we don't know at first glance and or about your farm. So, and you've talked to me a little bit about this before, but you do a lot of diving, I understand.
Yeah, so actually, it gets like any other, we all have our, we all have things we like to do in our off time. So I actually am a PADI certified dive master. And so I love to go diving when I can. And unfortunately, the last couple of years, it's been a little harder to do that. So I'm looking very forward to next year to continuing that pursuit. In the summertime, we do like to do boating, and like it's just as farming is basically we're outdoors lots, so we like to use the outdoors. So in the summertime, we like to do enjoys some of northern Alberta's pluses, so which is we have some very nice rivers up here. So it's interesting. So the other pictures I'm talking about, what we do. So the picture on the left is a picture with myself and Chrystia Freeland, who is the Deputy Prime Minister right now and playing a very important role in what's going on. But, it's interesting. We have to be able to get out and talk to people and tell them, we have to let people know what farming is or what agriculture is and how we do things. So that was a very good meeting with her, and it's very interesting to meet her. The next picture is basically I was able to participate in a trade mission to Korea and Japan to help talk about the benefits of canola. And so it was really interesting. It was a very interesting trip. It was a very, very busy trip. So the picture you see there is we are actually in it'd be like a Save on Foods in Japan. I think they had 26 stores, but basically we're looking at the canola oil that they sell from Canada. So the interesting thing out of that is we were able to visit a Costco there, and I was just absolutely blown away because the Costco in Japan looked like the Costco in Grand Prairie. It was actually interesting, other than you couldn't understand what you were buying. So
That's pretty wild. And Andre, you're pretty also involved in the ski community, am I correct?
Yes, I do love to ski. When I was a few years ago, when our kids were younger, we actually volunteered to run small community ski hills. So, it gets back to we try and do what we can do with, we try to be active in the community and like anybody else. And, we do different things.
Wonderful. Thanks, Andre. So moving along here. So Andre, you've talked to me a little bit about this, but maybe you can share with our audience members. You have worked off farm before, am I correct?
Yes, actually, I have. So basically, I kind of grew up in the farm, but when it's always difficult. It's always difficult to start out. So basically, this a few years ago now, but we did operate a small oil field business. Especially up in northern Alberta, obviously there's lots of oil and gas up here, and obviously lots of work needs to be done there. And it gets back to some of the other things I've done, but it all helps with you trying to run a farm, because farms are very, very diverse. And it gets back to you need to bring some of that business practice to the farm, because farms, like I say, they're diverse, but you need to know a lot. And I was actually thinking about this also, like some of the boards I've also sat on, I've been able to bring some of the management experience back to my farm and, basically apply them to the farm to make hopefully the farm a better place.
So your volunteer roles have helped you in your own farming practices is what you're
Yep,
suggesting.
absolutely. We try and give as much as we can. I think I always look at it, I think I take more than I give in some of the volunteer roles, but at the same time, yeah, it works really well, and it's a two-way street.
Gotcha. So Andre, what's this picture of here on the left? What are we looking at?
So actually, this is harvest from last year, and this is our last field. This is our last few feet of canola that we are combining. So yes, that's why we have two combines going head to head playing chicken right now. So and I can't remember who pulled out first.
Well, hopefully somebody did. That's all I can say on that.
Yeah.
So, and what are some difficulties, Andre, you've experienced as a canola farmer time?
Yeah.
Maybe.
Some of the difficulties, it gets back to anything. It's, a business is still a business. So it's, years are always different. One of the things we always have to worry about are the diverse weather conditions. 3 years ago, actually, I had very few acres I was able to combine because we had a very early snow in October and my whole crop was snowed under. So it gets back to diverse weather conditions are probably the worst. But the other interesting thing, it's becoming more and more of an issue, but basically is environmental concerns, because it gets back to not everybody understands what we do. And it gets back to we are sustainable. And, I think Tara was saying, she's a 4th generation farmer. I'm a 3rd generation farmer. That, to me, that means our farms have been sustainable. And, because they're still around. And you know what, I'm looking at passing this farm on to, one of my daughters or 2 of my daughters. And for that to happen, we have to be sustainable. So, it gets back to, I think the biggest, that's becoming a more and more of an issue is basically getting what we do out so everybody understands what we do, and, and to show that we are sustainable. And, we live with climate change every year. The climate changes, whether we've lived with it ever. That's probably the biggest thing that I've lived with for ever since I started farming, which has been a few years now. Every year our climate is changing and we have to be ready to respond to those conditions.
Sure. No, I hear you on that. Thanks, Andre. So Andre, can you talk to us a little bit about when do you know when to start growing canola and what helps canola plants grow?
Yeah, so it's really interesting. I got to take that picture I took last year is just of a canola plant, a little canola seedling just coming up. And it's interesting, you don't see it very often, but that little blue spot on it is actually the seed coating that we use to protect it from basically from disease if our soil is too cold. So usually what we do in the spring is when it does start to warm up, we start checking the soil temperature. And when it gets about between 6 and 8 degrees, we start thinking that it's getting, it's getting time to seed canola. So basically we look at the date, and then we start looking at the soil temperature, and then, we decide when it's time to start. But usually last week of April, first week of May is when we like to start. And, one of the things what we have to do, and we getting back to sustainable farming, there's a lot of people, and myself included, we do one pass. We put our seed down with our fertilizer all at the same time. And basically there's it's called the 4R of nutrients right now. And it's basically the best way to get the most efficiency out of our nutrients, but it's also one of the most beneficial to the climate. And basically it's the right type, but basically putting it down at the right place, the right time, and at the right rate. So that's why we use one pass. We put our seed down, we put our fertilizer down, and that's it. But one of the things I should talk about before that is because of the technology, we're also able to, during the winter or the fall before, we actually take samples of our soil to find out what we need to put into our soil for food for the plants, and that's for the fertilizers. So that's how we know what we have to put on. So basically we usually don't, for the most part, we don't put on more than we have to. Fertilizer is not cheap, and anything growing canola is not cheap either. So we only, it makes sense to only put on what you have to put on.
Absolutely. Thanks, Andre. And quick question. So what's the ideal temperature and what time do you actually start seeding at? Sorry.
Oh, so I think, so the ideal temperature, if I remember right, is about 10 degrees. So, and like I say, and that's why I said usually about when the soil temperature gets 6 to 8, I start thinking about it. But you know, the soil temperature is 10 degrees, it's definitely time to start seeding.
Okay, excellent. Great. Well, if it's okay with Lurie and Helena, I have a little bit of a video here to share with everybody, if I can play that.
Of
Okay.
course. First, though, we do have a question
yeah.
that ties in nicely. So Miss Cummings' class says we use irrigation. Does your farm, or is it more dry land?
No, we are very strictly dry land.
Okay.
Up in the Peace River country, there's not a lot of water. So yeah, we are very dry land.
Right. Thank you.
No problem. All right, we'll get this video going. Beautiful. All right. Well, we'll carry on now. Some more questions for Andre here. So, Andre, what's your favorite snacks and foods you like to make with canola oil, well, canola byproducts? Kind of a tongue twister, pardon me.
Yeah, that is a tongue twister, actually. So my favorite snacks is basically anything that tastes good, but you know, generally canolas, you know, it gets back to one thing we have learned. Oh, excuse me. One thing we have learned to cook with canola, but basically we use it in just about everything. So whether it's a nice chocolate chip oatmeal cookie or basically barbecuing a nice steak, you know, we use canola oil because it's such a good oil to use because it doesn't have flavor by itself, but it really brings out the flavors of what you use.
Excellent. Thank you, Andre. And Andre, I know you sent me this image. What is this image of exactly?
So this is, I was privileged last November to go to a what's called the Chinese Restaurant Awards in Vancouver. And so this is a plate of, and I believe these are ribs cooked in canola oil at one of the Chinese restaurants that won one of the awards. So it's really interesting. And they were talking about how they use canola oil in everything they use because it's kind of like I talked about it. They use the oil to bring out the flavors of what they are cooking. So
It certainly does look good as it's growing closer to lunchtime over here. I'll be honest about that. So thank you, Andre. So Carrie, oh, go ahead.
Oh, you're very welcome.
Just a couple more questions here for you. So, Andre, could you maybe talk next a little bit about environmental stewardship and what it means to you and kind of sustainability, if that's okay?
Oh, absolutely. You know, environmental stewardship, you know, is a really good way of saying, I think, of what we've been talking about. And it's getting back to, you know, I think if you talk to a lot of farmers, they talk about leaving their land better than they started farming with. And, you know, that's what environmental stewardship is. But, you know, it gets back to personally for me, it gets back to leaving the land for my daughters in better shape than I started it with. You know, as technology changes, basically we're able to do things better and we're able to do things, you know, we don't need as much. And we talked about, you know, I guess with fertilizers, only putting on as much as we need. And that's one of the things technology has been able to do for us. Basically, before we didn't know, we knew the plant needed fertilizer to grow or to make a good crop. But now we know how much it needs. And so basically that's all we put on. So that, you know, that's to me but, you know, short answer, environmental stewardship is leaving it better than you left it and leaving it for the next generation to take over and to continue what we think is good work.
Great. Thanks, Andre. And this image on our left here?
So that's more canola fields. So basically this is what you're seeing is sprayer tracks because we've had to desiccate the crop to make it quick growing because unfortunately different parts of the field sometimes mature differently. But basically this is combining a field of canola.
Great. Thank you, Andre. All right. And so what practices do you use on your farm, Andre, to ensure you're trying to be a sustainable producer, a sustainable farmer?
Yeah, so this is, I've been able to take a few pictures of some of the technologies we use, but for the most part, the basic background of what you're seeing is GPS, and GPS has been such a huge change for us. So, but at the same time, the two colored screens are basically the GPS monitors in our combine. And the one in the middle is a picture of our combine and basically what it looks like while we're combining. So it's always telling us where we're at, what we're doing and how we're doing it. But on the top corner, you could see it's called tank optimizer, but basically it doesn't matter whether we're seeding or combining GPS, we're using GPS to basically maximize our coverage, but also try to do things as efficiently as possible.
Excellent. And then, and how many combines did you say you have, Andre?
So we have, so actually on the right-hand side, that's a picture that's a few years old, but that's basically our harvesting crew. But basically we have two combines, and then we had, like I said, we usually have a tractor and a grain cart to unload them.
Oh, excellent.
So I think maybe I should just comment the really interesting thing is not everybody can farm, but the interesting thing is the technology that is available and what students need to do, or the ability for students to get a job in the ag sector right now and use technology is tremendous. So it's interesting. So if I have an issue with my combine right now, the first thing a technician comes and they open up a laptop, and then they start trying to figure out what's wrong with it. So it's really interesting how technology has changed things.
For sure. So do you think that there's be a lot of potential in the future for the next generation in regards to careers in the industry?
Oh, absolutely. Careers in the ag industry are basically, they're growing so fast. It's almost crazy. But the interesting thing is that because of technology, the type of careers are also changing too. When I get into a combine now, for the most part, everything I do is on a touch screen. So, it's not, farming has changed, and also how we farm has changed too.
Great. Well, thank you. And going on here, so I have another clip here, and maybe you want to talk about it, Andre. I just started playing in the background with your drone.
Okay, so one of the things I did do last year was we actually, part of this field, and you can see flags on the right, part of this field, we were actually doing trials with different types of varieties to see which variety did best on our farm. So, but basically we did that in coordination with one of the seed companies. And basically they also had a few, it was really interesting. They had a few experimental varieties out there. So it was really interesting to see varieties that will be coming out this year. So it was really, really interesting. So we spent about 3 hours, and we had 16 different strips. So we would combine one strip, and then we would weigh it. And that's what that white wagon is for. It's a weigh wagon. So we would dump into there, they would weigh it, and then they would dump it. So it was really interesting.
Cool. Excellent. Let it finish for anybody watching may be interested. That drone moves pretty quickly, hey, Andre?
Yeah.
That's wild.
So you can see the strips to the right, and that's what we would do. We'd take a strip in the middle of each variety. And so there's a lot of, it gets back to sometimes we seem to just do stuff, but there's a lot of science behind stuff. So, we need a lot of science-minded people in the ag industry.
Great. Well, and I think that's pretty important too, for sure, for the next generation to be aware of. So on that note, and before we kind of get into the last little bit of our presentation, Andre, did I miss anything? Was there anything else you really wanted to touch base on before we carry on?
No, actually, I think we've done quite well.
I think so too. Helena or Larry, are there any questions from the audience right now?
There was a question on how many combines you have, but I think you answered that pretty well. So I think we're ready to move on to MythBusters.
So what kind of hot dogs are you having?
What kind of hot dogs are we having?
Oh, that's one of the yeah. Oh no, they're just talking about how the hot dogs are
boiled.
Yes, one of the classes is having a hot dog day.
Hot dog
well,
day.
If you're that sounds really good right about now. So
Yeah, I would love a hot dog.
At school, wherever that is. But it will anyway, we'll play a little bit of a trivia game. And my apologies if you've already seen these questions. So this should be pretty easy for those who have. And we'll test Andre's knowledge a little bit as our past so yeah, now Andre has to pay attention too. So here we go. So our question is, what is vegetable oil, and are all vegetable oils the same? So your two options are, all vegetable oils are made the same and produced by similar vegetables, and all vegetable oils are not the same. Always check your ingredient list. Andre, what would you think would be the correct answer, A or B?
Do you want the fun answer or the right answer?
Oh boy. What, you know what? We could go with probably.
No. I'm thinking all vegetable oils are not the same.
Correct. Absolutely. Andre's cooked before, as you could probably tell. He's an expert chef. So again, and I do have a bottle of canola oil with me that's probably not popping through on Zoom screen right now. But if you go to the back on the ingredient list, like I do have in the picture here, so if you kind of read through the ingredients and whatnot, the listed ingredients are predominantly what's in that oil and all your other ingredients as well. So is canola oil gluten-free? So yes, it is clean before processing and tested for gluten proteins after refining, and tested for gluten proteins after it's refined. Or no, if canola is grown on a wheat field, it's impossible to clean before processing. Andre, what would you say? Is canola oil gluten-free?
Canola oil is gluten-free.
Excellent. Yes, it's cleaned and it's tested extensively before it's processed and tested along the way and after it's processed for gluten proteins after it's refined. So, true or false? There's no difference between canola and rapeseed. Andre, what do you say?
I'm saying there is a huge difference between canola and rapeseed.
Absolutely. So, well, let's try this one more time. So how you wanted to find that? So there would be a difference between canola and rapeseed, and that is a typo on my part, and I apologize to everyone at the top there. But canola was bred through conventional plant breeding methods from rapeseed plants, and unlike rapeseed plants, our canola has very low levels of uric acid and glucosinolates, which causes that bitter aftertaste often found in rapeseed oil. And as Andre always likes to talk about his tomato story, he's told this before and I've heard it, and I use it when I talk about this. So Andre, can you explain the tomato story and conventional breeding practices?
Oh, actually, can you go ahead? Can you do that for 2 seconds, please?
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, that's okay. So Andre has talked before about with conventional breeding is being quite similar to breeding tomato plants in the garden. So when you're growing it from your own seed, so every year when you grow tomatoes, you always want to keep back from tomato plants that grow the biggest and best tomatoes. You hold back those seeds, so hopefully you can progress the tomato plant to next year to grow even bigger and better tomatoes. So that's the kind of the general idea of conventional plant breeding, and how canola was bred from the traditional rapeseed plant to be the plant that it is. Okay, so canola oil has a shelf life of approximately 2 months, 1 year, 6 months, or it's so good it never expires. Andre, what would you say?
Oh, now you're making things tough. If I remember right, it's approximately 1 year.
Bullseye. Yes, it is 1 year. Wonderful. And so this would probably be, we'll see. We'll try to trick a Larry or Helena with this question. See if they were, oh, well, apparently I missed that question too. So I'm on a roll today. Something happened on the technology side, but I was crossing over, but that's quite okay. So carrying on, are there any questions from the audience at this time, Helena or Larry?
It doesn't look like it. It looks like we've covered all of our bases.
Excellent.
Yeah, that was fantastic. I think what really, kind of going through everything step by step like that, you did a lot. Andre, it was great. It was a wonderful. And then I love the drone images of, over your farm and actually showing what was happening there. So thank you for that.
Oh, you're very welcome.
Yes, and thank you, Andre. I really appreciated that and the help and all the pictures and great footage, of course. And always working with Andre on these kinds of things. And thank you to Larry and Helena for having us here today with your students and you. And just one last quick mention. So if I have partnered, if you were watching Alberta Pulse's presentation, I do work quite closely with their registered dietitian, Deborah McClellan. And for the teachers in the audience, we were at a various amount of teacher conferences in this last little while. So we did another session you can refer back to in regards to what's the food that you eat and Canadian heritage as it relates to the CTS credits that you can be sure to find some more information at. And as of Monday on March 14th, we'll be launching with Alberta wheat and Alberta barley and Alberta pulse growers our new Project Agriculture unit that goes along with the other Project Agriculture unit program as well, which you can find online. And of course, if you have any additional questions or things like that, feel free to check us out, learncanola.com, or you can email me as well directly. And thank you so much for having us here. And yeah, thanks again.
Wonderful. Well, Tara and Andre, thank you so much for increasing our knowledge. I'm going to be loving that now and taking some of the trivia questions and asking my family tonight at dinner if they know the answer. So we thank you so much for your time, your expertise, and we look forward to maybe sharing some pictures of Andre out in the field this spring as he's seeding. So thank you again and take care.
Oh, thank you very much.